This is Talking Points. Question. What will it take to convince the majority of Californians of the need for independence? Well, we've already talked about the whole California as a donor state thing. That point is already a well-accepted truth, which usually leads to the taxation without representation talking point, where we explain that California's 40 million people are constitutionally underrepresented in the Electoral College and the Senate, which means the voice of California voters is all but silenced. That is also undeniable. And of course, we can't forget the nation-state part of the argument that goes, California is already the 5th largest economy in the world, so an independent California nation will automatically qualify for a seat at the table among the G8 countries of the world. And California will become a major player in the arguments over climate change negotiations. We've discussed how California is not only politically different with its progressive California values, but we've also discussed the social and cultural differences between California and the rest of the United States. Again, all that is undeniable. If you go one by one down these talking points, all of which answer what we see as the FAQ things, the frequently answered questions about California independence, it starts to become very clear that California independence already has more value right now than remaining with the United States. It becomes a 2 + 2 = 4 discussion, daring people who want to argue against California independence to convince you that the facts are wrong. So, if just making an argument in favor of an independent California Republic was enough to make it actually happen, we'd already be there. So what will it take to convince the majority of Californians of the need for independence? How do you convince people to support California independence when the facts are already there and they're still not ready to be convinced? The second part of this talking point discussion goes, most polls we see already indicate that somewhere between 33% and 47% of Californians are not opposed to the idea of California as an independent nation. Then this notion becomes real when we hear people like Governor Gavin Newsom and even Jerry Brown before him talking about California as a nation state. But still, most of the people of California don't seem to pick up on this yet. It's almost like we've had 2 governors in a row who are trying to get Californians used to the idea of California acting like a country instead of a state. Almost. You would think this is enough in itself, but California independence faces an uphill battle still. Even if the facts are on our side, the dream of California independence struggles against a nostalgia for an American dream that either ceased to exist long ago or was never a reality for most Californians in the first place. What will it take to convince the majority of Californians of the need for independence? Well, with the facts on our side and poll numbers that are increasing for the acceptance of the idea of independence, and with California governors tossing around words like nation state, you would think the only thing left to make independence a reality would be a series of grossly apparent U.S. failures. Failures like an inability to fight a global pandemic, failure to secure basic fundamental human rights, crumbling infrastructure, climate change, or an electoral process that's openly being corrupted to end democracy. You know, things that would indicate some sort of collapse of the United States as we know it. And oh, wait, that's a thing too, right? So what's the answer here? Talking point. What will it take to convince the majority of Californians of the need for independence? Well, time is the first part of this answer. The California independence movement says independence is inevitable, and there's nothing indicating that isn't the case. The California independence movement has no expiration date. But obviously, it will take time for Californians to both become more and more disenchanted with the idea of remaining in the United States and more comfortable with the idea of California as an independent country. That short of just a complete collapse of the United States, that is. Bringing us to the second requirement for an answer. The answer here is you. The quote goes, my quote goes, I'm done with laid back Californians. I want Californians as arrogant in defense of California as Americans are vindictive about trying to tear California down. I want Californians to stand proud, speak loud, and stop pretending that being called elitist by America's willfully ignorant is anything we were ever ashamed of. The truth is, it will take California rebels like you talking to people, reaching out to Californians and making your voices heard. Californians owning it by proudly telling people about California independence, because that's how grassroots movements work. What will convince the majority of Californians of the need for California independence? Californians like you, normalizing the arguments for California independence. Californians actually talking to their family and friends, sharing the California independence movement's ideas and ideals. Oh, and hey, while you're at it, you could share Red Star Report. There's a good start. Because as more Californians keep openly talking about independence, the more Californians become used to the idea and become convinced that they can start talking about it. Then they convince more Californians to start talking about it. And eventually, spoiler alert, a majority of Californians are talking about it. That's how California independence becomes accepted as the will of the California people. In these darkening times, that's how California independence becomes the shining beacon and accepted viable alternative to everything that's going wrong in America today. What will convince the majority of Californians of the need for California independence? Answer: it will take time, and it will take you. This is Talking Points.